and welcome to the Search Bar, your virtual happy hour hosted by the Franklin Institute. My name is Adam Piazza, the Adult Program Specialist at the museum, and I'll be your moderator and bartender this evening. At the Search Bar, we get to know a little bit more about our scientists through conversation and questions submitted by you. We'll be chatting over one of our scientists' favorite drinks, which we'll make on screen for them to enjoy, and we encourage everyone at home to partake in a beverage themselves. So unwind and learn a little with us. Let us know what you are drinking in the comments section, and also place your questions for our scientists there. Today, our scientist is Senior Vice President of Education and Science at the Franklin Institute, Darryl Williams. Darryl Williams, thank you for joining us at the Search Bar. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Adam?
Doing great. It's a little warm today.
Yeah.
What I expect as we get into the warmer months, but being in the house, just getting used to this warm temperature is going to be a little harder during the day. But we're here.
Yeah, it's always like Memorial Weekend, and then that switch turns, and then it's like summer, right?
Yep. I think what's weird is like being like in the home situation. I'm more attuned to it because I don't have like central air, so I'm noticing when it gets warmer a lot quicker than usual.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Darryl, it is, happy hour time. We are going to be making a drink. But before we get into that, do you mind just letting the audience out there know who you are and just a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So as Adam said in the introduction, I'm the Senior Vice President of Science and Education at the Franklin Institute. I've been in the role for a little over 2 years now. Prior to that, though, I was actually, I've had a number of different career positions, but I'm formally trained as a chemical engineer. My PhD is in chemical engineering, and I also used to really focus pretty heavily on engineering education, looking at it from pre-college all the way to college and postgraduate. So yeah.
Very cool. So for those out there who are listening, again, don't forget throughout this entire event, send your questions to us in the Facebook comment section. So for Darryl, you've got questions related to, you mentioned engineering, chemical engineering, education, and of course, any other topics that you come up with throughout this conversation, you can send those in the comment section. And today, our bar back Joy will be sending me those questions that I will then input throughout our conversation. All right, so Darryl, I think it's time for a drink. What
sounds good
would you like today at the bar?
So I'm a fan of tequila, so I think we should dive in since it's nice and warm and it's summery. Let's mix up a margarita.
Awesome. So luckily for you, I have all those ingredients right now. Which
Awesome.
For all of those joining us out there, keep in mind everyone likes a margarita their own way. I think one thing you'll learn here as well is that people maybe prefer it frozen, straight up, on the rocks, flavored. So let us know in the comment section how you like your margarita. But Darryl, I learned that for you, you like a margarita that, of course, has tequila, right? It's going to have some lime juice.
Yep.
And it's also going to have some, nope, not that, right? We're not going to use triple sec or Contro. Instead, we're just going to use some simple syrup. And I've never had a margarita this way, so I'm excited to try it this way. And then we'll learn a little bit more about why you like tequila and all that. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is add some ice. So let me add some ice to our shaker.
Nice.
Cool.
What kind of tequila do you have?
I have a reposado.
It's a reposado. Okay, nice.
Yep. So we have 5 different types of tequila out there, right? The first one you have is Blanco. So that's going to be tequila that's not aged. I believe that has to be, how many, where is it? Oh yeah, it's just pretty much been distilled. And we get that from the agave plant. So right now.
Blue agave. It's important to specify that it's blue agave.
Has to be blue agave, right? And now if it's mezcal, it's a different type of agave, right? It's from some other part of Mexico. So añejo añejo is just simple distilled from the sugars in the agave plant. Reposado is aged. It's only aged from 2 to 12 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
so
then
so Blanco's first, then it goes Reposado.
And then añejo, which
is like
1 to 2 years, or no, 2 to double check this.
Give or take, yeah.
1 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have extra añejo, which I guess is like past 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you've got gold. We don't talk about gold tequila.
We don't talk about gold.
Right, that one is just like, I didn't quite mature a Blanco, and then I've added other things to it. It's just, we don't need to talk about the gold.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add, for each one, there's going to be 2 ounces of tequila. So I'm adding 4 in here because we're each going to have one. Then there's going to be 2 ounces of fresh squeezed lime juice, 1 per.
That's good.
Same goes for the simple syrup. All right.
So now one thing I can say to folks while they're watching is you're using simple syrup. The sort of original or quote unquote authentic way of doing it is actually agave nectar. So tequila is made from the nectar of the agave plant, right? And so the sugars from that get fermented, and that's what creates tequila. So if we're in Mexico and somebody was mixing up a margarita, they would actually use the nectar and not necessarily simple syrup. But because we want the recipe to be accessible, syrup, or some recipes call for Cointreau or triple sec. Basically what it's doing is the sweet with the acidity coming from the lime juice, and then the balance with the tequila, all of that mixed together just makes for a really refreshing drink.
For like any cocktail, right? It's always that balance. You got the spirit, the sweet, the sour, the chill factor, and also the water. And that water is important for a lot of things because it really opens it up. Now, someone had asked why a jigger is more than an ounce. Well, we've got, most jiggers are going to have 2 different measurements on it. You're going to have an ounce and usually an ounce and a half, sometimes also 2 ounces. But the other thing that to keep in mind is that a lot of people, when they're filling up with these, don't realize that even if you don't fill it up to the edge, you're losing quite a bit from that ounce measurement. So this isn't the best jigger. The best ones are going to be longer and narrower, so that little bit at the top is actually a less quantity.
I didn't know that.
Yep, so if you're out there in the market for a jigger, you want one that's tall and narrow. You get a more accurate measurement. So I've got the drink, and I'm going to shake this actually underneath the table because it can be a little loud with the ice in the middle.
Okay.
We're going to shake that for a couple seconds. The other thing that I'm noticing about this glass, based on what I learned from you, Darryl, is that there's no salt on the rim, right?
Yeah, so when I typically get a margarita, I don't ask for salt or sugar. I just like my margarita just pretty much just as is. But yeah, everybody has their own sort of particularities with drinks, so.
Oh, I had a little too much on this one. My bad. All right, that looks pretty good.
That's good.
All right, so Darryl, here's your drink.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent. You got it?
Got it.
Awesome. All right, let's cheers. Let's toast.
Salud.
Salud.
Cheers.
Ooh.
Right?
Oh, that's delicious.
We should just, go sit on the patio somewhere and just sip and.
That's fine. I'm just gonna go now. Bye.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Of course, we're gonna keep chatting. Now, someone asked, where can you get agave nectar? Right? They want the agave nectar experience. Where can they get that?
You can find. It's actually not that hard to find. You can find it in Whole Foods or Trader Joe's and other grocers. So it's actually not that difficult to find. It's actually one of the things that's really unique about it, or I don't know if it's unique, but agave nectar has a low hypoglycemic index. So people who have, certain dietary restrictions, it's actually a much better sugar to metabolize as opposed to regular table sugar or some other kinds of sugars. And actually too, I think what's really nice about this drink is we're using fresh ingredients, right? So fresh lime juice. If you're using a mix, that's usually not the best because it's a bunch of other kinds of artificial flavorings and sugars and stuff. And it's just, quite honestly, the flavor is not quite as good as just the good regular old lime juice.
Yep.
And balance with the sweet and the tequila, I think it's a beautiful drink.
It's definitely one thing I'm realizing, it doesn't have as much of like an acidic taste. And I'm guessing that's because a lot of times like a pre-made tequila mix, you're gonna probably have a lot of citric acid in there, which does a couple things. It helps add that bite that a lot of people might want, but it also helps with shelf life of that ingredient.
Right.
And I think what's also great is that I shook it, and a lot of people might think, oh, stirred versus frozen, but anything you usually drink that has either fresh juice or some type of protein, it's best to shake it. It gives you a little bit more aeration and smoother taste. If it was just alcohol and no added juices, shaking wouldn't do much. It would just always stay flat and not hold any bubbles. But all those fibers from fresh juice cling to it. And as you can see, it does stay pretty cloudy, which I'm really enjoying about it as well.
Really good. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Darryl, you obviously love tequila, right? And there's some good reasons for this because it's a delicious spirit of choice. But why else is like tequila like mean a lot to you?
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I was coming up and you know, in college and whatnot, and of course you hear all of those stories about people in tequila and getting crazy and wild and tequila shots, this and that. So I think before I had my first really true tequila tasting in Mexico, I didn't really have a full appreciation for tequila. And I think we've actually done a disservice to tequila, honestly, because it's actually really a quite sophisticated and a quite a well-respected alcohol or aperitif, if you will. Actually, it can be used as an aperitif. And so I just started learning a little bit more about it, how it's made, and all the different kinds, right? So we walked through at the beginning of this, we talked about Blanco, Reposado, Añejo, Extra Añejo, and Gold. And each of those different steps along the way really brings out different flavors and notes of the tequila that lead for me. So if I'm going to make a margarita, I'm not necessarily going to use a high quality tequila because you really sort of defeat the purpose of drinking it at that point. So I would usually use either a Reposado or a Blanco for a mixed drink. And then the Añejo and the Extra Añejo and the Golds are really more for sipping, because it's almost like a fine cognac or a whiskey or something like that, or a scotch. It's really meant to be enjoyed by sipping, not necessarily by downing, by taking shots, or by making mixed drinks. So when I learned about it, I just really became fascinated by it and just wanted to, kind of like most things that I become interested in, I kind of want to dive in and really learn more about it. And then I'll just sort of pan over. I brought down some of the bottles of tequila that I actually have.
Just one up in my bar. I see I need my help here, but continue.
So these are just a few of some of my favorites. So I have a couple of Extra Añejos. I've got the full suite of Casamigos here, which is the Blanco, this is Añejo, and the Reposado back here. And I even have Mezcal. So Mezcal is the cousin of tequila. It's not necessarily made from blue agave, but a lot of people like to say it's like the smoky cousin of tequila. Mm-hmm. And then back here, this is actually one of my favorites. This is called Dobel Diamante.
Okay.
This one is really good. It's actually unique because it's a blend of Reposado, Añejo, and Extra Añejo tequila.
Got it. And so for everyone out there who's wondering for clarification, right? Blanco is essentially like white. It's clear. Yeah. That's how it gets its name. Añejo means age, so if it's Extra Añejo, it's extra age. And Reposado, I'm not sure the exact translation and why that fits in the middle. Do you know why it's called Reposado?
Reposado, that's actually a good question. Maybe somebody online can chime in and give us some clues about why it's called Reposado.
Yeah.
And then this is another fun one. This one is called Casa Azul. So I like this one because all of the bottles are ceramic.
Oh, very nice.
And then it has this cool bell. So if you hit it just right, it'll make a ding. Isn't that cool?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So this is another really good tequila as well. So yeah, I just thought I would share.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't have as many different types of tequila. I have Hornitos and El Jimador. It's another one that's pretty decent, named after the people who go and grab the agave seeds, all those, which not the seeds, but like the piñas. It can be anywhere from like 5 or like 20 to 100 pounds each one of those like agave pieces. So it's like they're very heavy. And
they're very heavy. Yeah.
It's definitely one of those spirits that you kind of appreciate the methods that go into it, like that kind of story. Like while other spirits will start out with grains and have that origin, tequila has like this very hard-working feel to like when you drink a good glass of tequila, I feel like I'm drinking the stories of like 4 different people.
I would agree. Yeah.
Which is like very interesting. And like, for example, like your story, like right now, you're in Philadelphia, but that's not where you are from. Where are you from?
I'm actually originally from New Mexico, not Old Mexico. Mexico. Yeah, I grew up in Albuquerque. And so spent 18 years of my life there. And then right after high school, I just said, you know what, I want a different experience. And I decided to venture east and went to Hampton University in Southern Virginia. I was inspired to go to a historically Black university because of the show A Different World, which I know a number of people either know about or maybe they don't know about, but that was one of the spinoffs of the Cosby Show back in the day. And it really just was fascinating to me that there was this other world that exists out there of predominantly African-American college students on a campus where it just sort of, it really glamorized it and made it look like this place that you wanted to be a part of. And I really, I'm really happy that I took that leap and went to school there. And I have friends that I'll have probably forever from that experience. Yeah, it was really fantastic.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so what else happened along that journey? So like, that's where you majored in the chemical engineering, right?
Yeah.
What are some of those things that you kind of brought back with you from New Mexico, like from that life? What are some things?
So yeah, that's a really great question. I think for me, it's like, I really have an appreciation for, there's this sort of balance of being super ambitious and being, forward thinking and all of that, but at the same time, being able to sort of step back and just sort of, tranquilo, just kind of relax and not understanding like when sort of that ambition and when to pull back, when to embrace and to just sort of be in the moment. There's just something really unique and interesting about that type of place because in the summers it can get very hot during the day, but at night it cools off because there's low humidity. And so you can sleep with your windows open and get fresh air. Where I grew up is called the high desert. So mountains and all kinds of things. In the winter it would snow, but not stick because just that particular climate there. Our elevation was pretty close to that of Denver. So very high elevation. So just really, so it's just really interesting to come from that world, that part of the country, and then to venture off to the East Coast, which for me at the beginning was a complete culture shock because I never been around that many Black people before. So I was like, what is going on? But at the same time, it was refreshing to put myself into a new experience and something more about myself and about other people. I think really for me, that also sealed this passion that I have about learning about other people and other cultures. And so, yeah, I think all of that has really been a part of my trek, my journey.
And then once you got here to the East Coast, what's that set of stories? Like, what is that phase of Darryl that's then led you from studying engineering to working at the museum? What's that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting story, actually, because if you had talked to Darryl in college would not have said that he was going to be working at a science museum. And at that time, college Darryl thought he was going to pursue medical school. and use engineering as the way to, chemical engineering as the way to get there, and then decided his senior year, actually no, junior, because I should have known way before my senior year, but his junior year, that probably wasn't the best, didn't really fit me as a person.
Yeah.
And so then I just decided to continue on in chemical engineering. So then I went to the University of Maryland, College Park, right outside of DC. And I started off with getting my master's degree, and then my advisor said, you know, you can really stay, and there's funding, and you can continue to build out your research. And so I said, okay, that sounds like a great idea. Because I was really, at that time, I was thinking, I'll get my master's degree, and then I'll go and work in industry and kind of, you know, figure that world out. Yeah. But I started getting heavily into my research, and things were going really well. So I was like, you know what, I only have a few more years before I get my PhD. I might as well just knock this all out of the park. So I just went straight through from bachelor's all the way to PhD without stopping, because all of the opportunities presented themselves for me to be able to do that.
Very cool. It's a similar moment when you don't realize, like, I feel like there's not many people out there who, from the moment they walked into college to the moment they left, kind of stuck with that full career path intention. You know, for example, you know, I went to school with the intention of becoming an architect. So I went in for a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture program at Temple. And I think at like the 3rd year, we took a professional practice course. And it was like the idea of getting you used to like what being in the field was. And it was in that moment that I was just like, no, I can't work at a firm. Like, I love buildings, I love design, but I enjoy talking with people. I like this interaction. And I'm also a person who, when it comes to projects, likes a shorter timeline, like a little bit closer to instant gratification. So for a lot of things, it was like, if I worked at a firm for many years, I'd be working toward like someone else's big vision. I'd have a little bit of input, but I liked quick output when it came to things. And so luckily, during that time, I was already working part-time at the museum. And so I learned the benefits of like that communication, that engaging with the public. And that's kind of what led me down the path I'm in right now. And so, you know, you went down that path, and then what are some of those next pieces that?
Well, I was going to actually ask you just to follow, you know, to say a little bit more about that, because I'm wondering how you were figuring that part of your life out, and then looking at where you are now. Are there pieces of that you either would like to infuse in what you do now, or have you settled with the fact that that was just of your professional development that you just decided was not?
I think it was a little bit of like both for those, because I enjoyed everything I learned. But what happened was, I'm sorry, just like blanked on it. It's a process, right? So a lot of times if you know, have a degree in science, there's that method of thinking that you kind of really get ingrained on, especially if you go to like grad school. For architecture, it's a different way of thinking. There's like, you know, here's a problem that needs to get solved. And at the end of the day, it needs to obviously support a core function, right? I need to be able, as a person and as many different people, navigate this space, right? Architecture is anything, it's the creation of a space. But at the same time, you also need it to suit like emotions, right? Does it feel good? Is it comfortable? Are you trying to make someone feel safe? Or is it a weird type of design and you want them to feel like anxiousness because of scale? So there's a lot of ways of thinking about how to solve a problem that I use for stuff at the Franklin Institute. So I
would say the same thing for me, right? As an engineer, we're trained as problem solvers. We're trained to design and to think about like optimization, constraints.
Yep.
So you within that realm, then there's freedom in terms of the design and execution. But I do think that, as you're saying, like the skills that you gained from that are transferable regardless of,
absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Which is why I think the engineering education piece, which I mentioned earlier, for me has been a passion. Is not that I want every person to become an engineer, but it's qualities and the attributes and the skills that you gain from engineering, which is the design thinking piece that can be applied in any context, right?
Yep.
So I think that's interesting.
Yep. I feel like for almost any degree, if you think about it, you're learning a career's method of thinking. And if you don't go into that field afterward, you're still learning those pieces that'll transfer over. So another thing like for architecture is that when it came to presenting, even every detail of how you conveyed what you wanted to convey was equally as important. Like I can't physically build this space to give you that emotion. So how can my presentation let you know that like the feel of it is meant to be sleek, it's meant to be efficient. And so that method of communication was also something that I use when thinking about, things for the museum. So, when planning events like Science Ever Hours, it's, visualizing that moment you walk in, what does that space look like? What does that space feel like? When you move to the next room, is there something right there that catches your eye, or do you have to like meander a little bit? Creating that path of communication. Should it be straightforward? Do you open yourself up to exploration? And I think a lot of that goes into like our team, right? Museum or science education. Like at the end of the day, we want people to feel like a sense of like they're exploring, they're learning. So how does that carry over between things?
Right, I would agree. Yep. And it's too, so like I sort of like in terms of going back to the question you asked me about sort of my East Coast sort of life, I've sort of bounced up and down because so after grad school, then I actually came here to Philadelphia in the early 2000s and I did my postdoc at Children's Hospital in pediatric cardiology. And I was in the lab there for a couple of years. And I had an opportunity to serve as a mentor for a mentoring program for pre-college students. And that then led to open up a whole other set of doors that had never even crossed my mind, at least when I was studying engineering. And ever since then, it's just been sort of this really, I would describe it as like a non-traditional career.
Okay.
I'm trained as an engineer and I have the skills that I've acquired from that, but I'm, again, as we've been talking about, using them in a different context. And I'm not doing sophisticated modeling and experiments and things of that nature, but I think I bring that openness to creativity and to solutions, being solution oriented. There's a collaborative teamwork piece to the work that I do. And then really being sort of forward thinking and thinking about, where do we take the Franklin Institute when we turn 200 in 2024? What does that third century really look like? So, these are part of the conversations that we're having across the organization. And it's really fun to be part of that.
So you went from CHOP, right? And then what was your next step?
Yeah, I went from CHOP to working as executive director of a nonprofit in the Science Center called iPraxis, which still exists today. The whole focus of that organization was to create a bridge between the bio-life sciences and all of the innovation happening in that Science Center corridor, and bridging that to the communities that surround it that are very under-resourced, very disconnected from all that's happening there by Penn and all of that. So how can we create a bridge and really thinking about access and inclusion? That was a really interesting experience. And then we got a big NSF grant that connected me to the National Science Foundation. And then I went from working at iPraxis to becoming a program director for the National Science Foundation. And then I was leading a lot of engineering education and research projects and initiatives across the country, and primarily looking at pre-college engineering, but also looking at undergraduate and graduate engineering education. And so, so I got to really get a bird's eye view of what's happening And I think at that time, that was in 2009-ish, I guess. So right after the market crashed. Oh, even before then, about a year, I started my own consultancy. So I went out on my own and decided that I could, I felt like I was skilled enough and had an ability to network in a way where I could build my own practice.
Okay.
That was when the market crashed. And then I was like, I got to eat. So, you know what I mean? So that's when I went and pursued the opportunity at the National Science Foundation. And I was a program director for them for about 4 years. And I led a really big project or program called Innovative Technology Experiences for Students and Teachers, iTest.
Okay.
And that program was really about understanding how to create experiences for students and for educators, but primarily students, that can happen in informal settings as well as informal settings. And how do we think about the intersection of formal and informal learning?
Okay.
Recognizing that we learn a lot of things in class and in school, but most of that gets reinforced in the real world. And so, like our organization, the Franklin Institute, is an informal based organization. And so we support reinforcing science and engineering, STEM concepts and ways of thinking that students and educators are dealing with every day in formal context. So how do those two worlds intersect? So we were looking at that.
Yeah.
And then from there, I went to Tufts University, and I was at Tufts for about 5 years in the School of Engineering as a Dean of Undergraduate Education. And then I also was a director of our their Center for STEM Diversity.
Okay.
And it's like, how do we think about access and inclusion and getting more students from underrepresented groups involved in engineering, and to see engineering as a pathway, a career pathway, and how we think about trajectory from pursuit and persistence. And like Angela Duckworth, who's faculty at Penn, she was doing some work at that time around grit. And so how do we design learning experiences that perpetuate this grit, where kids are pursuing it, despite what their particular life situations might be or what have it. Like how do we facilitate and reinforce grit among students?
Very cool. I think that's the idea for the museum, right? To create those experiences that is something that like everyone feels they have access to and feels like they're part of it. They don't want to feel like they go into a museum and it's not for them. Creating it should be for everyone that like this building or place serves. And so, for the Franklin Institute, it's how does that serve Philadelphia?
Mm-hmm.
And it truly feels like it's like their museum, right? It's our museum, which is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that set you in what city then were you at that point? You were where?
So that was in Boston, right outside of Boston.
Okay, so I was outside of Boston.
So that's the furthest north I've lived, and then I came back here over 2 years ago, back to Philadelphia. Yeah, I was super excited to come back to Philly. There's something really special about Philadelphia, and honestly, I didn't feel that way the first time I came here, because when I moved up here from DC after grad school, I wasn't quite sure. I felt like a fish out of water. I couldn't, for some reason, that first year, it was really hard to feel like I could connect with the city.
Okay.
And like any place wherever you live, it's always about the people you meet and the community you create. And then that springs all kinds of really great experiences and opportunities. And so it was, so I left. My first stay in Philadelphia was 2004 to 2009.
Okay.
I moved back here in 2018. So I was super excited to move back.
And when you moved back and started at the museum, it was right during the time of the Science Festival, right? It was, and awards. So you were just like really. So
I was like, it's a party all the time. There was food everywhere.
They're like, you just started, and you're like, we've got 100 events across the city, and then these very important people, and you're like, is this what every day at the museum is like?
Literally.
And they're like, Not quite. Close to.
Yeah, my assistant would tell me, she's like, "Don't get used to this. This only happens in April."
Yep.
Yeah, it's like okay. So the only disadvantage is it always falls around my birthday, so I can never like if I'm gonna travel, I can't because and the science festival always fall around my birthday. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just celebrate with all of Philadelphia.
We'll just like subtly plan your birthday party as like a PSF event
Exactly.
next year. They're like, but this event doesn't fall within the week. It's like it's a special event and it's just about like birthdays. We'll figure it out. I've got a year.
We'll figure it out.
So with this being like your first museum setting, what are some of those like really quick things you realize that like I am now working in a museum setting I was not expecting or prepared for blank? What would that be? Like, what was that shock?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think when I was thrown into, at the time that I started, which was around awards and around Science Festival, I really wasn't anticipating it being such a frenzy.
Okay.
It really felt like it was really overwhelming, all of the events, and it's pretty amazing that we're able to pull those two things off one right after the other, and that people don't, I mean, obviously everybody passes out once science, right? Yeah. It's an immense amount of lead up to that, and then the actual execution of it when it happens, and then it's pretty impressive that we're able to do that. So I think it was probably that piece of it, the frenzy, and then two, I think it was also we have such an incredible balance of things that happen in the building and things that happen outside of the building. Our partnerships across the region, we've been around for almost 200 years for a reason, right? And so I think taking all of that in has really, I'm honored to be part and to be a steward of the institution, because it's a pretty impressive place.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree about that. It is very impressive, like the stuff we do, and like that nice diverse range of like programming and that reach and like working with other institutions. It does feel very special and like built into the city, which is really great.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, as I'm thinking about it, it's interesting because obviously we describe ourselves as a museum, and which in part we are. But I think because my purview of the organization is really super holistic, right? So in my portfolio, I not only focus on science education and communication, also looking at things like our awards program and the journal and collections and curatorial. And not many people know we have one of the oldest journals in the country since 1826, right? And one of the oldest science awards programs in the country. Yeah. So it's like those kinds of things I really think set apart from other science organizations, science museums, science centers. And sometimes I feel like it sort of gets lost, those other pieces of who we are. And I really try to be intentional about, and it's interesting because I feel like our chair has said this before. He hardly ever uses the word museum. He always refers to us as an institute, which I know some people think, institute's not the most welcoming, inclusive term, but I think the point that I'm trying to make is that we're definitely more than being a museum. Okay. The museum part of who we are is our bread and butter, but we're so much more than that. And I'm thrilled to be able to be part of it.
I think we're seeing that, like, the museum's like the bread and butter, but there's also, everything we do outside of it. And during this moments of isolation, we're still learning like what that museum looks like when you can't unfortunately be in the building. And I feel like, you're overseeing like a lot of that team as well with programs like Search Bar or, of our scientists. So seeing how that kind of branch work extends. beyond the building is also like exciting during this time. Like,
right.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're drinking. All right, take a sip. We're good.
I'm not gonna let this good margarita go to waste.
Yeah, I was realizing you weren't drinking any, and I was about to be like, well,
was I? Oh, I was.
It's still, we're in conversation. So,
yeah. It's interesting too. I guess I hadn't realized the conversation we were having about your own particular experiences was really interesting, because I think I knew that you had an architecture background. Yeah. I think for me, and I don't know if you relate to this either or as well, but this idea of kind of being like you said, about exploration and curiosity. I really think that that's part of what fuels and excites not only me, but I think everybody that works at the Franklin, is that we're in this environment that we can activate that part of who we are. And the idea is to make that infectious so that other people embrace that too.
Yep.
And I think, that's not many people can say they work and do that kind of work. And there's it's fulfilling work. You know what I mean?
It's interesting because, we talk about like my degrees in architecture, and I can use the processes I learned a lot at the museum, but I remember, what was it, like 2 years ago when the fire at Notre Dame happened, and we had the current science part, and they're like, do you want to? I'm like, yes. So like, I got to be on the floor and relating to current topics, talk about like dome structure, flying buttresses and arches, and like really just geek out with people. And a lot of stuff just came back to me. And I feel like no other job would have been like, oh, this is what's happening in the news right now. Go out on the floor and teach it. Like, that doesn't happen at like other office jobs. Like, I have the opportunity where, everything is always changing. Something's new in the news. If there's something out there about like a new music instrument, there's like people on our team who would be like, you want me to go on camera and talk to you about like sound physics and how it works? Like, yes.
Actually, yeah.
We have these people with all these like passions, but like the museum itself kind of collects us. Then like they're like, "Ooh, I'm going to grab you off the shelf and you're going to talk about this." And we all have those interests, and like I know you have other interests and like passions. So what are some of those things that like right now, not at work, what are you doing that's like keeping you entertained, occupied, and learning? What are some of those things?
Yeah, so a couple of interests of mine. I really enjoy design. So like interior design. I've started getting into gardening more because, why not? I thought about getting a dog.
I don't have a yard. So
oh, yeah?
The only thing I've grown so far from scraps, I did grow some green onions. And,
really?
And then they got out of hand. Like they're their own monster. And I don't eat green onions that much, but I've got a lot if you need it.
Yeah. So I started cooking, been doing a lot of cooking. I'm really into, I think everybody's been tuning in to Netflix and Hulu and all those other streaming services, but I've really always been into documentaries. And I most recently, within probably the last couple of years, maybe ever since I taught a course at Tufts for first year engineering students. And it was a course that I co-created with a colleague at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. And it was an exploration of engineering and art and understanding how the two worlds come together through design.
Yeah.
And there's this really, really fantastic docuseries called Abstract on Netflix. I don't know if
I was hoping you'd bring that one up.
It is so good.
Because I love it. I remember seeing the first episode of the current season with, I'm going to mispronounce his name because it's Dutch, Olafson, the guy with like color. And I just sat on my couch just mesmerized. Like I knew about this guy, but learning, it was just like, it made me get up and go paint stuff. Like it just it was so good.
You can't help but like just get this like rush of like wanting to do something creative after you watch that show or that. Yeah, so we use that some of those the episode on the first season with Tinker Hatfield, who used to be the designer for Nike.
Yes, yes.
That's a really good one to show students the whole process of design and understanding form and function, and and aesthetics, and like how those three come together. Um, so I love that one, and then I really like I've been watching Ugly Delicious by Dave Chang.
Yes, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, so Dave Chang is a James Beard awarded chef who's the founder of a restaurant chain called Momofuku.
Oh, yeah, yep.
I don't know, do we have a Momofuku in Philly? I don't think we do we?
We do not know.
Yeah, but anyway, so he's Korean American, really interesting perspective. I really find him pretty fascinating because he's pretty straightforward thinker, like he doesn't beat around the bush, but he's also, I think by the fact that he created this docu-series, that he's pretty open-minded and wants to learn more about other culture. And because he's coming from the lens of a Korean American, of course, he's coming from an immigrant family perspective and understanding what it was like growing up in Northern Virginia, which or DC, which is very diverse and mixed. So his docuseries I find fascinating. It's not only just about the food, but it's also what food is wrapped in culture. Mm-hmm. So he really challenged this notion of authentic, because in his mind he thinks authentic is a dirty word, because he's like, so focused on something being authentic, it doesn't leave room for people to actually make it their own. And over humanity, it's hard to say what's quote unquote from a food perspective, what's authentic, because we've been migrating for millennium and influences coming from all over the world. And of course, there's certain concentrations of different kinds of cuisine based off of the ingredients and the things that are in that particular location. But his premise is like, why do we care so much about whether something's quote unquote authentic? He's like, it should be more about understanding the basics of how to make that particular cuisine or dish, but then being okay with experimenting with it and adding something to it or whatever to kind of make it your own. So I really find his docuseries really fascinating. And then the other one that I really love that I think is amazing is this one called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat.
Yep, I've heard of it. Yep.
Yeah, by Samin Nasrat. That one is great. In fact, I actually am here. This is such a good book. Kim McGlon, who hopefully is watching, she gave me this book for my birthday, and I thank her so much. I actually saw the docuseries before getting the book, and so for me, it totally changed my whole perspective on cooking.
Okay.
Which actually changed my perspective. Some people are going to laugh at this, but my perspective on cooking changed too when I was working at Tufts. And it was back during the time when Blue Apron was really popular, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a great way for people to sort of try to break out of their norm and cycle of everyday cooking and try different recipes and whatever. But every single recipe with Blue Aprons always starts off with you heat your pan, you add your oil, you add your aromatics, your salt and your pepper first, and then and you step it from there. And I think I've always, even though I haven't done Blue Apron in over 2-3 years at this point, but I still always remember certain steps that are reinforced over and over again in the recipes. And then when you read and you watch her docuseries and you listen to her explain different things and how different the combination of these 4 things, right? Salt, fat, acid, and heat. It's just really like, it sounds simple, but it's really, it's pretty fascinating actually.
So what have you cooked recently, during this time that you feel like you learned the most out of making this dish? Like, you either had an epiphany moment, maybe the result wasn't the tastiest thing so far, but like you learned the most from making what recently?
I think the most recent thing where I was sort of like, okay, I can understand. Well, there's two dishes. One was risotto, and then the other was gumbo.
Oh,
So gumbo is talk about flavor building and it's a very somehow it appears to be very complicated, but it's actually it makes sense when you step through the process of making it. But when all those different flavors come together to make that particular soup, if you will,
yeah.
it's just phenomenal. I think it's one of the best American dishes because it's a fusion of African, Spanish, and French, and all of that comes together, and it's such a beautiful dish.
Sounds lovely. Usually for me, like I haven't made anything new recently, but one of like my go-to dishes that I love making and everything is like braised short rib. There's just something about the process of like and you have the wine and the flavors and like the idea that for a lot of that dish they even suggest it tastes better the next day. Like they suggest that like, packing it up and then you skim off the fat, like the next day even tastes better. Like that doesn't often happen with food where they're like, what's better than the original? The leftovers. Like when does that ever happen? And it always sticks with me with that one. I'm like, I'm gonna look forward to eating you down the line. And then when it comes to design, like in Philadelphia, what is like your favorite piece of design in Philly? Maybe it's a building, maybe it's a space, maybe it's a piece of work at like the art museum.
Well, let me tell you what kills me design-wise, which I was talking to a friend about this weekend on the way over to Jersey to buy some plants for my garden upstairs. And I said, you know what? I was like, I really, really wish, I can't even talk. I said, Willy. I really, really wish that we have such amazing green space, and particularly Fairmount Park, going over to like Centennial Park, where we hosted the World's Fair, however many hundreds or some years ago. And that is such a beautiful stretch of the city that I feel like it's so forgotten. I wish that we could invest in revitalizing that completely, because it would just be such a beautiful place for people to escape to. I look at cities like Chicago and like even Boston that reclaimed its green space by doing the Big Dig, and then they were able to. It's just like there's so much opportunity for design and really sort of amplifying what we already have and restoring what we already have. I mean, Fairmount Park, of course, is the largest urban park in the country.
Yep.
And that section, what I just referred to, the Centennial Park, is just like, come on, like it's so beautiful back there. It could be spectacular.
I mean, you have like some parts of it, but it always still feels like disconnected. You've got like the Japanese tea house, you've got the horticultural center, Leeds Touch. Like I agree, it doesn't feel as connected. Yeah. And I think that's a struggle like the city faces with a few things, like how we treat our waterfront. Like Schuylkill, we've got down to an artistic angle. And hopefully, we'll figure out how to connect better to the Delaware.
Yeah.
I-95's there, so we're going to cap that hopefully.
Well,
it's nice to walk to the river.
You could do a Big Dig project, but that would be billions and billions of dollars, like unbelievable amount of money.
And so, now we're going to kind of like end this with like your Philly experience as we wrap up. And I think we could keep going. There were many topics that we've sort of like talked about before that we just have you on again at some point. But to like wrap up this part, I feel like it's getting there. It's like, kind of quick rapid fire. What's your favorite dish in Philadelphia? Like, doesn't matter the restaurant. What is that favorite dish?
Ooh. What's my favorite dish? I'm still on that one. It's hard to say favorite because
the dish that makes you feel really good on the inside. like the hearty dish, like that one.
I'm trying to think of I feel like I've been cooking so much I forgot what the restaurant scene is. I do. Talk about feeling disconnected. I'm like, I forget what the restaurant scene was like in Philly.
Oh, that's so sad. I get it.
It is so sad. I'm honestly stumped. I can't answer the question for some weird reason.
All right, we'll come back to that next time.
Yeah.
What food do you like to pair with a margarita?
So you can do, fish is really good, like a nice grilled fish. Okay. Yeah, I think that's another thing too, and that's for another conversation about like, I grew up in New Mexico. I really enjoy New Mexican food, which is actually different from Mexican food. But I feel like Mexican food is it's so diverse, and I don't feel like most people really move beyond the tacos and burritos and all of the fajitas and like, but the food of Mexico is incredibly diverse and incredibly delicious. But I think with the margarita, because of the lime, like a really nice fish would be good.
Okay. Yeah. So now I want fish. I get that pairing.
Yeah.
I'm half Puerto Rican and half Italian. So right now I'm just like.
Oh, there's a story.
Right? There's another story. But I'm like, right now I can go for like a good beignet, like a pork shoulder with like white rice and like some tostones. Like, see, now we're hungry. Like, we should.
You're just making me hungry. Now you're making me hungry.
I know. Maybe it's a good thing we're ending this on food. Because if we had started off this conversation.
Yeah, we'd be struggling right now.
We would be angling the cameras toward our stove. It'll just be like cooking with Adam and Darryl. I'm like, what are you making?
Is it rude to have food while we're eating? Can we like have snacks the next time we have a conversation?
Yes.
That'd be too like crunchy and people will get annoyed.
So I'm not worried about others for that one. We'll just make like, a delicious like spicy popcorn dish. Like, what's your favorite type of popcorn? Because I can get like that nice Mexican seasoning type on there. So
you could do like a savory, or you could do like right now in my pantry, I have Chicago style, which is the caramel with the cheddar cheese mix.
Okay, yeah, I've had that.
So
they're not on the same popcorn, right? They're just together?
Yeah, they're together, yeah. It's just all kinds of good.
That sounds, so next time we'll have popcorn.
Okay, and I love popcorn too.
Apparently based off our bar back Joy, she's also letting us know everyone out there is getting hungry, so we're doing a really good job. At, like, we'll spend 5 minutes just saying food. You're like, baked potato. Just that's the next episode. We'll drink, eat popcorn, and just say different foods every 5 minutes. That's we've been doing some product. I've been doing some product placement, so I don't know. Do I get any sort of kickbacks or like anybody like? I mean, at least on my part, I will be ordering that book because you're the second person to really talk about that book, and so I feel like, all right, that's 2 people. I'm going to buy this book now. So you've done a good job.
You should watch the docuseries too. It's actually really well done.
Cool.
Yep.
So while we wrap this episode up of the Search Bar, if you could think about like the story you've told so far today of like, where you started from in New Mexico to where you are now, what is like an overarching message to people out there who are also watching, they're having a drink, they're getting ready for dinner? What's like your like message for them right now?
I think one of the things to tell people is, we've all been in this situation where we've been forced to stay home and restrict our, getting out and about. But I really hope that most people have at least taken this opportunity to at least be a little self-reflective. These kinds of opportunities don't come around often where we really get to push the pause button. So I hope that people are doing that with themselves and, health, self-care, mental health is super important during this time. And so if you're having any challenges there, make sure you're reaching out to family and friends. But yeah, just this doesn't, there's a positive spin on this. And I know we keep hearing the negative of the virus and infections and staying at home and all the restrictions and all that. I think the positive spin is that it is a pause moment for people to just sort of say, you know what, maybe there's this, I can make some changes or, you know, pivot or whatever it might be. So I think that's what I would say.
A good message. I feel, you know, like right now people are like, we've been in this, especially for Philadelphia, you know, we've been in this for a little over 2 months. There still is this, like, you can sort of see this type of finish line as certain restrictions are lifted, but it's not going to go back to normal and it's not going to be happening quickly. So there's still time for people to do that self-discovery and just figure things out. Like, and that should always happen too.
Yep.
So Darryl, I want to thank you very much for joining us in the search bar. This was a delightful conversation. I'm gonna let you finish. I keep talking over you.
No, I was just saying thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I enjoyed getting your passion for tequila as well. Like, I learned a lot from you, saw your collection. I got to up mine from this one bottle. So next time I might just have like 8 empty bottles, but I'll have bottles of tequila.
Okay. I may have some questions about how they got empty, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll worry about that next time. But again, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I want to thank everyone out there for joining us who tuned in today. And I look forward to seeing everyone out the search bar again. Darryl, would you like to be a guest again in the near future?
I would love to. It sounds fun.
And then don't tell me what drink it is, but brainstorm what that drink might be. And so we can have the audience be like, what do you think Darryl's next drink gonna be? So let us know in the comments what you think Darryl's next drink is. It's also his favorite, and we'll see how it does. Do you have one in your mind what that drink would be? Can you give like one subtle clue to help the audience out there?
Grapefruit.
Oh, okay. I already have like 2 ideas for what that might be. Cool. All right. So again, thank you all very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next time at the search bar.